good afternoon, everybody. It's fabulous to have you all along this afternoon to talk about a really important topic, and is how we can create a more respectful school. I think that the title of this webinar is possibly, though, less important than the strapline underneath. It's about how to take respect from being a hope for the future to becoming a present cultural reality. That sounds like a whole lot of hard work, and it's possibly because we've gotten respect all around the wrong way. So I guess I want to begin by declaring that what I'm going to present to you this afternoon might even be viewed as slightly provocative, slightly controversial, because what I'm going to say to you this afternoon is that we've been tackling respect in a very explicit and a very formal way in Australian schools. For about the last 20 years or so, we've had a real sincere focus in that space. And where we have found ourselves as a result of that explicit formal focus is at a point where respect is the most common value espoused by Australian schools. Okay, so of all the values that schools could have, the top three are respect and responsibility, and mainly due to the influence of the independent school sector, what comes in at number three is the word excellence, because we have to convince everyone that we're excellent, which of course is a little bit oxymoronish in itself, because if everyone's excellent, then everyone just became average. So we're going to talk today specifically about that most common value of respect. And I guess where I begin is from even potentially a slightly pessimistic point of view, because if the majority, if the highest number of Australian schools are out there saying that we are into respect, it's a value, it's important here, it's what counts in our school, then I shouldn't have the phenomena of working with school leaders and teachers all around Australia, not just in Tasmania. I shouldn't have the phenomena of asking them, do you think we have an issue in Australian schools with respect? And having such an overwhelming majority of them put their hand up. So when it comes to this notion of building respect by labelling it as a value, which is really us saying that we think it's a hope for the future, it's something that we believe that if we label it as a value and we formalise it, so we put it on letterheads and we do collages out of it and we do murals out of respect and we make posters in the classroom and we reward students for demonstrating respect at assembly, then we should be able to get respect. And what we're hoping is for a social version of what we could call trickle-down economics. We're hoping that by putting it at the top, that the influence will spread downwards, and it just doesn't happen that way. When we're looking to build a respectful school, what we need to do is start at the grassroots and work up to respect being a label that we could accurately and honestly bestow upon our schools. So we've got to get our hands dirty. We've got to get right down to what it is that we need to do. We need to change right at the coalface, right where people are interacting at the school gate, in the classroom, in the playground, in the car park, in staff meetings. We need to get down to how it is that we can impact those interactions such that eventually we could say, you know what, everyone around here is pretty respectful. Respect matters here more than it does in other schools. Respect is a defining feature of us. And it's that notion of defining, I guess, is where I want to start. And one of the issues that we have around respect is that everyone wants it, but nobody's really sure what they're talking about. Aretha Franklin had a go at it, R-E-S-P-E-C-T, find out what it means to me. She's saying, she's not even going to tell you. She's going to say, you need to find out what it means to me. So you need to learn by trial and error what it is that I'm talking about when I mean respect. And we all sing along without ever going, actually, hang on, this is a little bit of a rip-off, isn't it? She's written a whole song about respect, made herself incredibly famous and popular with it, and she still didn't tell us what respect is. And the issue that we face around that is that we are leaving ourselves open to respect being defined in our school environment by others. Everyone's having a bit of a guess about what we mean by respect. There's a fabulous I guess fabulous might not be the right word, because depending on your tastes in humour, there's an episode of the notorious cartoon South Park where Eric Cartman is made a police officer and the power corrupts him, and he runs around town telling people they must respect ma authorita. And if they don't, then they are hit with a truncheon by Cartman. So he's defining that respect is be nice to me or I'm going to hurt you. Now, for most of us, when we're asked to grab a pen and write down what your definition of respect is, it's unlikely to be do what I say or I'll hurt you. But what I would almost guarantee is that for every single person who's here in this webinar today, if I did ask you to write down what's respect mean to you, that we had 28 people who registered for the webinar this afternoon, we would have 28 different definitions. Because we aren't clear enough on what that means. And I guess if you were to then extend that and head out to your school and ask all of the adults in your school environment, what does respect mean to you, you would probably find another plethora of definitions out there. So one of the issues that we have around respect is that we have no idea what it is that we're talking about. For some people, respect is something that they want to be shown. Not that they want to give. For some people, respect is something simple like holding a door or offering a seat to an elderly person on a bus. And for some people, respect is inherent within long-term relationships only. So we need to start to get clearer about what we mean by it. And I guess I don't want to get too deep and philosophical on you, but I guess my favourite definition of what respect means came from Leo Tolstoy. And in Anna Karenina, he wrote that respect was invented to cover the empty space where love should be. And I have dwelled and thought on this deeply over some time now. And what I think Tolstoy is telling us is that in some ways we are rebranding love with the word respect, because love just sounds a little difficult for some of us to say out loud. But you know what, I want, and I certainly, when I was a school principal, I wanted my school to be filled with love. And thereby, I think that we would describe our school as being a respectful place. So I don't think we want to shy away from those big intentions. That respect is all about how we can reintroduce love to the learning environment, how we can reintroduce care, how we can reintroduce nurturing, and how we can reintroduce a true and evident focus on personal connection within our workspaces. And it's a really big challenge. But today is going to be all about how it is that we could efficiently and productively set about that challenge. So to do that, what I'd like to actually point out to you today is that I would love you to step up. I would love you. Respect for me is where there's a beautiful combination of expectation and support. So I'm here today to try and support you as current and potential school leaders to be able to develop these respectful school environments, respectful school cultures. I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to hit you with as much as I possibly can that I think will be useful to you in that pursuit. But if you'd step up, if you would step in, if you would lean in to this conversation, then I think that you will further enrich it for other people. So a couple of ways you can do that. Number one is on the control panel. You can see that one is a hand feature. So if you would, don't worry, I'm not going to call upon you if you put your hand up, but if you would, just put your hand up and hit the hand button if you can see it there, and I'll be able to see your hand go up. See, Diane's put it up, Jeanette's put her hand up, Kathy has, Annette has, Emma has, Simon has, Tracy has. So lots and lots of people I can see they're putting their hand up. I'm going to encourage you now, put your hand down again, because otherwise leaving your hand up will make me think that you've got something to say here. So you just press the same button again and your hand will go down. And the great part about all the way through the webinar is that you'll hear me probably somewhat awkwardly just at some stage go, I'm just going to check the attendee list, and I'll have a look and just see whether there's anybody that does have their hand up. And if it's you, I can unmute you and we can have a little interaction around this. Respect has become, and I'm going to hopefully point out to you today that I don't think it needs to be as ethereal as it is, but it's become this ethereal, nebulous, hard to get a handle on concept. And I think sometimes that requires a little conversation to be clear about to be clear about how that actually works in a practical way. So please feel free to put your hand up and to make this a conversation. If you are feeling a little shy, there's a question box. So you can have a look at the question box. I've just had a quick flick there to my control panel to see whether that's to make sure it's open. And if you've got a question of two types, one is if it's a bit of a technical question. I'm noticing some names that I don't think we've seen on the attendee list yet today. So if this is your first foray into GoToWebinar, welcome. Great to have you here. But if you're having any technical issues with how you actually use and participate, then just pop them in there. Our amazing business manager, Chris, is online today, and she's going to be able to handle any technical questions you've got. And then you might have a content question. So you might have an issue about what it is that I'm speaking about. I don't know about that, Adam, or what about this, Adam? And let's answer it. Let's see if we can do something about that. So if you write a question in there, I'll probably pause and say, I've got a question here from Stuart. He says this. Let's work on that for a minute, because I just firmly believe that the more we contextualize some of these really important points, the more likely we are to do something productive in the next hour. Okay, so let's get to work, hey? I guess, before I do, the compulsion here is to say, let's do this webinar together. Let's not treat it like a TV show. Let's really be of benefit to each other by stepping up. Let's be respectful. Let's be firm and fair in the way that we operate. So what I guess I want to point out to you first of all is that for most people, and we've associated by a linguistic association, we associate the word with respect with command. We want to command respect from people, but I want to put to you that what we're really looking to do is to compel it. What we're looking to do is to create conditions in which people felt they just had to respect the other people around them. And that can include people of authority. So it's not about respecting people just because of their authority. That would be an authoritarian approach to respect, which is to say, you will respect me because of my rank, because I've got the badge, because I've got the title of teacher or school leader. I'm powerful, and thereby you must respect me. That's commanding respect. What we're looking to do is to say, could we still be authorities, but could we do it in an authoritative way? Could it be our conduct that creates an environment where people are kind of forced to respect you? I know that for me, if I were to reflect on somebody who I respected, I would sometimes probably go to a family member, probably my father. And it's not because my father commanded respect from me. He didn't use his physical presence over me. He didn't use his intellect over me. He never used his position of being older in the family in an authoritarian way to demean me. But boy, I respected him. And it was because of the beautiful combination of expectation and support that he was able to provide that meant that I have an enormous respect for my father. And I guess what I'm compelling you to do here is to try to think about how is it that people get that done. The teaching of respect needs to be seen as quite different as the way that we would teach other subject matter. I think there are three key imperatives when we're talking about matching pedagogy to purpose in schools. Number one would be around the teaching of knowledge, which you can kind of do from a command position. We deliver the knowledge. We stand up there as the authority and we say, I have the knowledge, you now need to have it, here it is. And in some way, we pass that knowledge to people. The second imperative is around teaching skills. And I've always said that when you're looking to teach skills, what you're looking to do is to, first of all, make sure that we're explicit about what it means. So when I'm teaching students, for instance, on-task behaviour, I am really explicit about what on-task means. There are three sentences that we mantra because the only way to be explicit is to attach language to it. And so those three sentences are to get on the job, stay on the job, and to finish the job. We practice it in silly voices. And then what you need to do once you've made it explicit is you apply it to something non-threatening. We make a game out of it. And once we've had some success there, we can graduate to the real world. And then there's the great icky notion of how we teach values. And as I'm hoping you're starting to draw some dots here around me saying that merely naming respect as a value of our school and formalising its existence in our school isn't a great way to get people to interact differently in the informal realms. And to be honest, most of your school environment is an informal realm. And it means that when it comes to values, what we need to do is first of all model them. So if you are looking for an increase in your perception around respect in your school, my firm compulsion is to you, the first thing you can do is just to start to work with yourselves, with your leadership team, and with your staff to start to demonstrate it more. Values need to be modelled. Values are things that you need to be immersed in. You don't learn respect by being taught about it on a Wednesday afternoon, in the same way that you can't learn other values and capabilities such as empathy and responsibility by being taught about it on a Wednesday afternoon. All you do is raise awareness of it, but you don't change the people. Changing the people requires immersion, and that means that all of the adults have to seize their leadership imperative around respect in the school by demonstrating it more. When it comes to the three key stakeholder groups within a school, you've got your staff, you've got your parents, and you've got your students. And I'm always asking people, if we're going to look for a change in a particular value, such as respect, which group do you think is likely to change first if we're going to be successful? And people realise pretty quickly that actually the parents aren't going to just change out of the blue because they haven't had the benefit of this webinar this afternoon. The students aren't going to just change out of the blue. They're often responding to context and external stimuli. But the staff can choose to change. And if we decide that there are certain practices in our school that we would describe as being disrespectful in some way, then we need to find a way without shame, without embarrassment, but actually with pride to walk away from those practices, to draw a line in the sand and to say, yep, it's us that need to change first. And the good part about making those changes is that's the moment that you start to move away from commanding respect to compelling it, and you end up in a really exciting place. So to let you know, I guess, where I come from in terms of respect, there's a fabulous model that was put together by a really clever fellow called Darren Hill, behavioural psychologist. He's gone a little too far there, and I've become quite obsessed with this in terms of obsessed is the wrong word, but I've become really focused on this model in terms of how you build responsibility within relationships and within relational environments. Now, what Hill says is that in any relationship, there's a trade-off between conflict and trust. So he's saying that where the relationship's new, or perhaps where it started to become dysfunctional, so we're at the bottom of Hill's model, he says it's not conflict as in we're fighting all the time, but we don't know what each other is talking about. And in those environments where there's a low level of trust and a high level of conflict, we should be focusing on what Hill calls content behaviours. Content behaviours are outrageously specific. Why? Because we're looking for a quick win. We're not looking to say, okay, by doing a values exercise and labelling respect as a value, that somehow that's going to have an impact for us now or long or well into the future. But we would like to improve something now. When I think back to a time in my life where I was in a relationship where there was low trust and high conflict, I would consider myself as a 15-year-old and the relationship with my mother. There was certainly a lot of conflict in that relationship, and it was because if we're really honest about it, wasn't doing much that was particularly trustworthy. So my mother had to use these incredibly specific behaviours to get me to change. So she would tell me when I left for school to go and do another day at year 9, she would tell me, Adam, when you get home, what I need you to do is to put your bag away. You need to put your lunchbox in the sink. You need to put your shoes in your bedroom at the end of your bed so we don't have this disaster of you looking for your shoes for 45 minutes like we had this morning. You need to go into the backyard and mow the lawn, and you need to come inside and do 30 minutes of homework. If you get all those things done, then you can go out into the street and play cricket with Brett Chard. I would roll my eyes like every 15-year-old does when they get the list of chores. And I'd say, yes, Mum, and I'd go to walk off, and she'd say, stop. So what? And she would say, tell me what you're going to do this afternoon. And I would have to repeat the list back, and she would get infuriated with me if I was to forget one of the things on the list. Your shoes, Adam, your shoes. Come on, I've told you about this 1,000 times. And I'd go, okay. And when I think about what was going on there, what was this relationship all about? Because Mum went another step, by the way. That step was usually that when I got home from school that afternoon, the list was on the kitchen bench with check boxes next to each of the behaviours that I was expected to demonstrate. When I think about what Mum was up to, I think she was just after a little win. And what that little win, for instance, might be that I go and mow the lawn. Mum would get home from work and she would look in the backyard and see some short grass and say, good job on the lawn, mate. And I would say, no worries, Mum. And my tail would wag a little bit. And what happens in that moment is that we get a minuscule reduction in conflict and a tiny increase in trust. And it's only come through the opportunity to thank and congratulate someone for a behaviour that they value. because what mum's teaching me is about responsibility. But could you imagine if mum leapt up to the top of this, where Hill talks about traits in schools? I would refer to these very specifically as our values. Could you imagine if mum leapt up to the top there and tried to formalise or take a quick shortcut to get me to do the right thing? Can you imagine as I walk out the door that my mother says to me, Adam, when you get home from school this afternoon, we're responsible. I'm wondering if you'd like to guess what I would have done, what 15-year-old me would have done in that moment. I would have been out in the street playing cricket with Brett Chard. Why? Because we have conflict over our definition of responsibility. Mum's definition is do these little things. That's what respect is about. That's what responsibility is about in our home. My definition of responsibility is do whatever you like, just don't break anything. There's a funny little middle earth here around that Hill calls context behaviours, where he refers to labels that cover only a small number of behaviours. So you start to get success with specifics, and then you move into the middle where you're successful with a label that covers only a small number of behaviours, and then you can move up to big labels like respect and responsibility. Early childhood teachers do this superbly because they teach 5-year-old boys that to use inside voices, because inside voices is 3 behaviours. It's put your hand up, wait to be acknowledged, and use the right volume. And I thank and congratulate early childhood teachers every day for doing that hard, horrible, repetitive work to help those boys to be successful with that label. Because when they do, we can start to speak with them about how the fact that they did use their inside voice was a really respectful thing to do. You learn definitions like that by joining the dots between all of the successful demonstrations of content and context behaviours. You don't learn how to be respectful by being told that our value in our school is respect. Now go and try and do it. You know, we don't really know what we're supposed to do first. We're working in the wrong direction. And I think this is the first and the most key realisation that school leaders need to make if they want to get somewhere with this. So in getting somewhere with this, what I would like to do today is to just give you a handful of things that you could do that can make that difference for you. And the first one is to remember that the first steps towards respect needn't be enormous. It needn't be an onerous task to try and all of a sudden, because we're focusing on respect in our school and we've labelled it as a value, that all of a sudden now we need to stamp out any behaviours that are disrespectful. That's not the imperative you have in mind. What we're looking for is to thank and congratulate en masse the population of our school, particularly our students, for demonstrating the very first thing that they're currently not demonstrating that we could label as respectful. A video that I saw many, many years ago brought this to my attention starkly. And it was a documentary I saw about a turnaround of a really challenging school in the United States. It was one of those schools that had respect as a value of the school, yet it was a decidedly disrespectful environment. So a new principal arrived and noticed the gap between the label of respect and the conduct of the people in that school environment. There was, you know, gangs and fights and drug transactions and violence against teachers, and it was an awful environment. So what did this principal do? The first thing the principal did was take over the graphic art class for I think it was about the year 9s or so. And he made their group project for a 6-month period to redesign the school's logo. They had to go and consult with other people around the school. They had to find out what the school was into, what sort of figures, what sort of animals, what sort of representation they were looking for, what sort of image they wanted to put out into the community about how good they were and where they were going and how they were improving. So they studied hard. These kids ran surveys and found out what other people were wanting to say about their school, what they would prefer to say about their school, because setting your values is clearly an aspiration, a task in aspiration. They come up with their logo, and it was a great piece of work. And then what he did was, for the second semester with the graphic art class, he brought in a local artist who was fabulous with carving in lino. And so he taught all of the year 10s how to carve in lino, and their project was to carve a lino square of the logo perfectly. And then what they did was they went out to every classroom in the school, and each of these students carved the logo into the doorway So on the floor in the doorway, they carved the new logo into the linoleum. And it was spoken about at assemblies. The first thing that we're going to do this week, everyone was like, why are you carving stuff in the floor? What's going on? There's all these things on the floor. And the principal and these students got up at assembly and they said, we thank you for noticing the work on the school's new logo. The only rule we have in our school is that we don't step on our logo. We show it some respect. And what happened was, instead of those students walking into for instance, a science classroom and having the teacher begin their lesson with sentences around, all right, you lot in, you come, put those books down. No, don't you sit next to him, and put those Bunsen burners down. I haven't told anyone to touch equipment yet. Instead of beginning the lesson with negativity such as that, any student who stepped over the logo and didn't trot on it was thanked and congratulated for it. And so what they had was an automatic increase in the number of times that we were thanking the students for demonstrating respect. We were giving them the first dot to draw between that and the next behaviour that they focused on afterwards. Now, most of us wouldn't sit here saying, okay, what's the first thing we want to see when we embark upon building a respectful school? We want to see students take an extra long step when they walk into the classroom. And that's not what it's about. We over-enormosize this. We make it something that's bigger than it needs to be. We make it broader, and every time we do, we make it difficult to understand. We are looking for what I mentioned before, that low-hanging fruit. We're looking for the opportunity to thank and congratulate students for one behaviour, and if you can speak really clearly about that one content behaviour, as silly as one large step over our logo might be, you're beginning the task of helping students get on the same page with you about understanding what respect really is all about. The next thing I want you to be aware of is that it's okay. Some people think that when it comes to values, that it's not okay to extrinsically reward their presence, because what you're supposed to do is to value being respectful when you're around other people. So I find it fascinating, the ongoing and the internal debate around rewarding extrinsically. Rewarding extrinsically has a purpose, and it also has incredibly clear limitations. So the example I like to draw around that is that for behaviours to become established, they first need to be demonstrated the first time. And to get someone to do something straight away, a shortcut to getting that done is to reward extrinsically. So for most of you who are school leaders who are in the room today, if I were to ask you, why do you lead in schools? You will give me some really deep intrinsic motivator for why you get up every day and do the difficult and important work that you do. It'll be something around because I believe that the way that I can make a contribution to the planet is to help young people get on more positive life trajectories. That's deep. That's intrinsic. But the challenge that I put to most of you is, can you think back? Can you remember back to when you first got your qualifications as a teacher? Can you remember finishing university, and can you remember sort of, sitting by the letterbox? If you're like me, there was no email back when that happened. It was sitting by the letterbox waiting for those results from your final year of study to come in so that you can say, yes, I'm qualified. I haven't got an awesome certificate and haven't done the cap and gown thing yet, but I've got a little piece of paper here that allows me to get registered and to get a job. And can you think about what your main motivator was to get that job? And I'm going to suggest to you that if we're frightfully honest about the whole thing, that perhaps it wasn't because I believe that the way that I can make a positive contribution to the planet is to help young people get on a better life trajectory. I think it's because I want to get paid. I've gone 4 years, 3 years, perhaps, if you're as old as me, and of going without pay and working at McDonald's. I want to do a job I want to do, and I need every second Thursday to start happening so that I can pay my rent, pay my vehicle registration, or I can move out of home. I can, do these things if I can just get paid. So the first motivator to get going is extrinsic. It's just that wears off over time. And this is the way that it works with students as well, is that bringing the benefit, the purpose of an extrinsic reward would be to bring a target behaviour to attention. So if you can get clear about what are the target behaviours that you're looking to see, what's your version of stepping over the lino carving in the doorway? What's the first behavior you're looking to see? And you can reward that extrinsically, then you can start to create a new habit out of it in your school. Rewarding it extrinsically consistently will not allow it to embed as a habit. What we need to do is to help people transition from extrinsic reward dependency to intrinsic reward motivation. And what that's about is, can we follow, for instance, the 3 R's of rewards, which is to reward at the start regularly, demonstrate that it is a focus. This is new, this is big. You do the right thing, you get a trophy, you get a certificate, you get a point, you get, whatever it is that you do to reward extrinsically, a reward that comes from someone else to you to say, we value that, thank you for that. Then what you need to do is to reward randomly, which means that you don't hand it out every single time. You don't get a reward every single time you do the right thing, but you just sometimes do. And what happens is we go through this, again, a bit like Hill's model, we go through a little Middle Earth period where we start to go, so I'm not going to get rewarded every single time. How do I know if the next one's going to be rewarded? I don't. I'm just going to have to do it and see what happens. And maybe the next one, maybe the next one. So you transition from regularly to randomly and then rarely. So it's just every now and then we extrinsically reward, not regularly. Every now and then we extrinsically reward a behavior just to show, yeah, we've noticed you're still doing that. And we think that's fabulous. And what happens beyond rarely is that you don't need to reward it at all because the motivator has become intrinsic. And the good news at that point is that you can choose a new behavior to start to reward extrinsically when it starts to embed. So what happens when you reward extrinsically is you'll get a spike, you'll get an improvement. And then what happens if you continue to rely on that is that it will drop away quite remarkably. And it's okay, it's expected that that be the case. What we want to do is try and change behavior so that we can keep getting little spikes. And little spikes in different behaviours is how you eventually allow students to build a bank, a set of behaviours that they might define as being respectful. It's pretty cool when that starts to happen. I've certainly learned this the wrong way. I remember being in my time as principal, thinking, wow, people are starting to treat each other a little disrespectfully around here. This needs to change. And so I said, we're going to have Respect Week. And so I said that the teachers in the school have all been handed raffle tickets. And anytime you do something that is respectful, the teachers are going to hand you a raffle ticket. And you can put the raffle ticket in a box that we've put in your classroom. And at the end, you're going to put your class on the raffle ticket, your name of your class on the raffle ticket. And at assembly on Friday, we're going to put all the tickets in a big barrel, and we're going to draw one ticket out. And if your class is that ticket, then you win a pizza lunch. Bribe with pizza. Great extrinsic reward, isn't it? And I was fascinated to see, will I see more behaviours that are being demonstrated that we would call respectful behaviours through this extrinsic reward that came out of the blue and was quite new. And what do you know? 345 was the magic number of tickets that were in the barrel come that Friday. So that's pretty fabulous, I reckon. So roughly 90 new behaviours every day had been spotted and extrinsically rewarded across that week. And I thought, wow, how good's that? 90 a day. I have hit a winner here. This is a home run. I have discovered the key to implementing respect in my school. So I thought, I'm going to run it again. I'm going to keep this going. We've got something good happening here. The next week was 186. So we had dropped to almost 50% of the number of tickets, and the following week was 134. So what the students were telling us is that they weren't transitioning. Because we were rewarding every single time, they were getting a bit bored with it. They were relying on it and realising that the chances of them actually winning the pizza lunch were reasonably slim because there was 24 classes in the school. So yeah, it's kind of no big deal. There's not much point in doing this. There's no transitioning happening here. So what we did do was just occasionally we realised what was happening here. And so we changed the focus of the week. I would just occasionally, maybe about twice a term, I would have barrel week, and I would tell students we're looking for this. So it wouldn't be respect, because that could be anything. It would be kind words. We have a week where we're going to focus on kind words, and we would go bang straight back up to around that 340 mark, and then I wouldn't do it the next week. Because I know that the relaxation that happens after that 340 is going to be lower than the 340, but I also know that it'll be higher than when I started. So if I keep just popping in these little spikes of content behaviours rather than broad, extensively rewarded traits and values, then I'm able to, over time, demonstrate enough behaviours in our school that we would call ourselves respectful. And that's pretty cool when that happens. A couple of little things also that you can do. Number one is to define and conquer. I guess it's a little play on words with the divide and conquer thing here. And it's a reminder for me that having people's buy-in when we're looking to determine what those first behaviours are going to be in your school, having people who, the people who are expected to demonstrate those behaviours decide what the behaviours are, is a cool way to get them motivated to demonstrate that behaviour quickly and immediately. So for instance, when we went about defining respect in one of my previous schools where I was principal, the key stakeholders of the school, we talked and consulted with students about it, but after that we made decisions with our parent community about what our behaviours, what our values should be. So we had our values, we determined what they were. And then, as a staff, we were asked for term one, what's the best definition, what's the best descriptor of moving respectfully or conducting ourselves respectfully that we would see in the school. And we put that sentence in there, what we were going to do. We then went to the students, went to the student leaders in the school. We said, can you tell us what the students should be doing to show respect in term one? We put that on the chart as well. And we went to the school council and we said, what do you think that parents should be doing to be seen demonstrating respect? What's the first thing they need to do? And we put that on the chart. And the chart went up out the front of the school, and everybody who saw that chart knew that it was something that was an expectation that we had of everybody. We talked about each of those behaviours in assembly, and then we changed them again, changed the behaviours every term, so that we were including people in what are the behaviours we're doing, that we're getting a spike in, we're letting that relaxation happen down, but we know that it's not going to be relaxed all the way back to where we first started, and then we change the behaviour again. So the issue for us, or the issue for many schools that they face around respect, is often we say respect is this. We come up with a really broad definition that nobody really knows how to do it when they walk into the school, and we leave it there. We hope that by sitting it at the top, at top letterheads or in policy, that somehow that trickle-down effect will happen, and it doesn't. We hope that by putting it on signs and putting it up in prominent places around the school, that somehow that will immerse people in that behaviour and they'll need to do it. Yet signs, I mean, if you think about the validity of signs as a communication tool, I wonder how many of you need to drive past a billboard of some description on the way to work every day. I'm wondering how often it is that you need to drive past that billboard before you stop noticing it. Advertisers understand this. They know the number is 7. That if you were to go past a sign or a billboard 7 times, after that it just becomes a blank sign. You stop looking at it. So what they do is they change the billboard, obviously. The example I like to draw around communication and defining and values and behaviours is often the sign that I see most readily in all of the schools that I visit around the country, and it's a sign above the sink in the staff room that says, please put your own dishes either in the dishwasher or put them away. I think you can probably guess what's in the sink beneath that sign in most of the schools I visit. It's chock-a-block with dirty dishes and spoons and glasses, and not forks, because forks, of course, just go missing in schools. So I really want you to start to think about how it is that you could get other people engaged in really specific behaviours and how you can keep changing them. Because we're looking to build respect. What we're looking for is constant spiking of a new behaviour that we could define as respect, and each of those spikes is a dot that the kids can draw. Each of those new behaviours adds to their definition of respect. And if we're adding the same behaviours, then we're getting a collective definition of what it means to be respectful. That's a good thing. Finally, what I want to point out to you, as I mentioned earlier in the webinar today, for me, respect is a beautiful combination of expectations and support. I actually spoke recently to a friend of mine who's heavily involved in curriculum delivery to schools, and what she was telling me was that respect is, and I was saying that respect is really about being firm and fair. I'll talk to that more in just a minute. But what she was telling me was that we have in curriculum, we've been talking about respectful assessment tasks, and I said, okay, you'll have to enlighten me there. What do you mean? And she said, we've been discussing how it is utterly disrespectful to provide a student with an assessment task that they can't do. the expectation is way too high. And it is also utterly disrespectful to give an assessment task to a student who you know will already get 100 out of 100 on that task. The expectation in that instance is way too low. She said expectations differentiated for every student and then married with an appropriate level of support is what makes the assessment task rich and certainly what makes it respectful. I thought that's fascinating. In the work that I do with schools, we're often, many of the schools we work with have a strong restorative intention. And a couple of peak bodies in restorative practices looked into relationships and looked into respect. And they said, what are the features? What are the little things? What are the sort of content or context behaviour level things that exist within relationships that are the most functional, that are the most respectful? And this is the kinds of things that they came up with that are appearing on the screen for you now. And I'm just going to pause on a couple of them here. Number one is this notion of being firm and fair. This is expectations plus support. Don't expect respect to happen in your school by encouraging people to merely be nice to each other. Respect is not just niceness. Respect is not just love, encouragement, and nurturing. Respect is expectations. Respect is boundaries. Respect is limits. So be really clear about what it is in your school that you're looking to make clear in a firm way. What are the things that you can and you can't do in your school? And don't come up with hundreds of them, but just make the things that you really want to stand for abundantly clear, the things that your students really shouldn't mess with you on. And then support like crazy to reach that expectation. Some of the other things you can see here, and I guess I'm betting that these were the kinds of things that you would say, you know, that of course they exist within these relationships. What we're looking for is to say, could we make these content behaviour type foci? Could you bring these to, first of all, be extrinsically rewarded in your school and then transition everybody in your school to start to use them differently, to start to value them intrinsically? This one's a really interesting one, the notion of apologising and being vulnerable. I really find that a fascinating topic. I worked with a teacher recently who I showed this to, and she made a noise, and the noise was, and I said, oh, Jan, I feel like you've got something you want to say. And Jan did have something to say. She said, Adam, I'm not going to be apologising to my students. I teach in a really tough year 10 environment with some kids who are severely behaviourally disaffected. She said, if I walk around apologising for the fact that I'm not doing a good enough job today, or apologising for the fact that your mum's a so-and-so, or you didn't get breakfast this morning, or you know your life's hard, then I'm handing over all my power. And the kids are not going to respond to that. They're going to eat me alive. And I said, okay. Luckily, I had a great relationship with Jan, and she spoke to, I said, would you just do me a favour? And she said, what's that? And I said, give me 2 weeks. I said, just run the apology thing for 2 weeks. I said, if you get anything wrong, I said, just apologise for it straight up and see if you can fix it. And she said, oh, fine. And so she ran it. And for 2 weeks later, I came back to Jan and I said, so how'd you go? And she said, oh, look. She said, I did all right. And I said, what do you mean? And she goes, look, I'm apologising still and I'm going to keep doing it. I said, why is that? She goes, just because it works. I don't like it, but I'm doing it because it works. And I went, okay, I'll take that. Jan then sort of said to me, I'm actually now finding myself apologising for things that I didn't do. And she goes, but just because it works. And I think that it's an amazing story in Jan being vulnerable, of being able to actually, and one, I commend her on her vulnerability and courage just to run the experiment. And two, I commend her on being able to see that putting herself out there and releasing some of her authority, releasing her long-formed belief that the only way to get respect is to command it, not compel it, is what sat behind one improved piece of practice in her work. And I think that's fantastic. And then there's a few other bits and pieces here that I wonder if you could just use them as a reflective frame. If you could think about what it is about your school that perhaps isn't doing these things, and which of these, if for instance, if you were going to say, okay, we're going to deploy these in our school, where would you start? What would be the first thing you would do to try and become a more respectful school? What would be the first little lino carving in the doorway that you would use to try and make respect start to happen in your school? Okay, well, I've sort of gone through many, I forgot predictability there on the end there, didn't I? I've gone and sort of blurted, as I promised I would, and try to be of service to you. I want to really encourage you now to think about if there's anything that you really want to know, if you've got any questions about this notion of respect, and pop them in the question box. I'm more than happy over the next few minutes to stop and dwell on some of those. Or if you want to whack a hand up, remember that I can unmute you and we can have a quick chat. A couple of things that I want you to do is, number one, at least download the slide deck from today so that you can go and talk to other leaders in your school about this concept. There's a handout section. So if you look at your control panel, you'll see a handout section, and I've uploaded a PDF of the slide deck from today so that you can have those key concepts available to you. Go and dwell on it again. I actually think that of all the webinars that we've run as part of our partnership with TASDOE within our Combating Bullying initiative, I think of all the ones we've run, this is the one that requires the most thought. It requires the most sense making. So I really want you to have that resource as a way of being able to make sense of what's a difficult topic that, as I've mentioned, I contend that we've been getting it wrong for a long period of time. And then what I want you to do is to write chat in the question box if you would like to chat about how it is that we could help you with that. So what we do, and we work with several Tasmanian schools as well as schools in every state and territory around Australia, is work with them to build cultures that we could actually confidently say, yeah, ours is a respectful school. We do it by focusing on school leadership. We do it by focusing on improving student behaviour through better teacher practice. And we do it by implementing restorative practices right across these school communities across extensive periods of time. If that sounds like something that you would like to have a chat about for your school, you're not committing, don't relax. We're not going to send you an invoice if you write the word chat. But if you would like to chat about that for your school, particularly I know that so many people are doing their planning for 2020, then please do put that word down there and we'll follow up and see a couple of people pop that in now, which is awesome. So a couple of webinars that are coming up just next week. One is around this. Look, the respect is something that I love talking about. The notion of disruptive innovation is just my favourite way to think. Respect, I think, is important. Disruptive innovation is a tool, it's a lens that you can use to look at how you can change things in your school with the least possible effort. So I'm big on economy of effort. I'm big on getting things done with the least possible sweat. I don't know whether that means that I'm inherently lazy or whether it means that I'm big on using my time effectively. I'm going to prefer to frame it as the second. So if talking about disruptive innovation, which really, in a nutshell, is about saying, can we do things differently, not better? I am utterly frustrated with schools being asked, and sometimes even choosing, to do things, to go to a lot of effort that get a small return on investment. You know, we'll implement huge programs that give us a 0.03% improvement in student learning outcomes in maths, and you think, wow, I went to a lot of effort there and didn't get much return. I'm bigger on little effort, big return. And this webinar is an absolute ripper for that. So I really want to encourage you. You're going to get a link in a follow-up email from us today. You're going to get a link to be able to register for that one. And I'm going to put on a show for this one. I love the stories and the examples that you'll get out of this webinar. So please come along to that one. And then we're going to run one as well for teachers, just like we're running one today about managing conflict in the classroom. If you've got any staff members who you go, oh, wow, okay, learning how to manage conflict effectively in the staff room would be a really good idea. There's still got the next hour or so to be able to register for that, because we're running that one at 3:45 today. And then we're going to be running this one next Thursday on cultivating teacher-student relationships. How it is that you can manage high quality, high expectation relationships, and how you can use them to be able to get better performance from your students. So it's not just about, and I think that often when we're talking about relationships and when we're talking about student learning outcomes, we keep drawing a line, keep putting a wall between the two. This is about no walls here. We're going to show how you can build relationships, and it almost sounds manipulative, doesn't it? We're going to lever them. We're going to use those relationships for improved performance. What does it look like to be able to do that? And that webinar will be on at 3:45 next week. You're going to get a link to that one as well. So thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciated having you here today. Such a fascinating topic. If there's anything we can do to help you out, that please feel free to have a look at our website. Reach out to us. As an email address and a phone number for you as well. Thank you so much for your time, for your attendance. And I thank you also for the really important work that you're doing to create these respectful environments. You're doing an immense nation building thing when you create environments where young people can genuinely learn respect and feel safe enough to learn effectively as well. So well done, and we'll see you for our next webinar. Okay, bye for now.